every night is a doorway to a new story you only need to listen. Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory, and I'll be your voice tonight as we drift gently towards sleep. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep a little easier, consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot. Tell me in the comments, what time is it for you right now? And do you have any little bedtime rituals? Now, settle in, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, because it's time for tonight's story. It was supposed to be a routine transfer, just one of those quiet overnight ambulance rides from the city detention center to the county hospital. A psychiatric hold, nothing aggressive. No emergency, the kind of thing you barely remember by. Morning, my partner didn't even come on this run. Dispatch said it was low priority and the patient was already sedated. I was told his name was Ronald Blake, mid-30s, no priors, no family, just paperwork, and an officer with a key eye. Met them both at the loading dock of the holding facility around 3 a.m. The officer didn't say much, handed me the file and double-checked the straps. Like he'd done this before Blake was awake when I opened the rig, calm, staring, straight ahead. Like he was watching something far away through the wall. I said his name. He blinked, but didn't speak. His pulse was steady. He was cuffed and belted and had an IV already running. The paperwork said psych observation. No specific diagnosis, just notes about erratic speech and silence. We left without lights or sirens. No need for noise on a dead road like that. I drove while the officer sat in the back with Blake. Every few minutes I glanced at the monitor. Everything normal until we hit the curve past the underpass. That's when I looked back through the mirror and noticed the officer wasn't in the back anymore. Just gone. The straps still tied on Blake. The bench empty. I pulled over fast. Jumped out, opened the rear doors. Blake looked up at me calmly and said, "He's gone," I asked, where he didn't answer. I looked around, nothing but road and dark trees and a sky too quiet. For that kind of moment, I tried calling dispatch. No response. Radio static. I got back in and finished the drive on instinct. Didn't think, just kept going straight to County General. I figured the officer got dropped early, or maybe I missed something. Maybe I was overtired. I told myself all the things people tell themselves. When something doesn't fit, I pulled into the ER bay and waved down a nurse. She asked the name. I gave it to her and handed over the transfer form. She looked it over and frowned. "This isn't ours," she said. "We didn't call this in." I said it came through dispatch from the city lockup. She typed into her system, looked at me and said, "We don't have a Ronald Blake scheduled, and the address on this form is invalid. That site's been closed for years." Before I could answer, she called for hospital security, not in a panic, just procedure. But the way her eyes lingered on mine told me she thought something wasn't right. I went back to the rig. Blake was still there, breathing, eyes open, silent. He looked at me and said, "Don't leave me here." His voice was steady, but there was something in it that felt rehearsed, like he was repeating a line he'd said too many times already. I stood there frozen for a second. Then the hospital doors opened again, and two orderlies came out without saying a word. One of them looked at me and said, "Is this the transfer from Unit 9? I said, "There is no Unit 9, and he looked at me like I was the crazy one. That was the moment I realized I'd delivered someone to a hospital that didn't know who he was, with paperwork no one signed from a building that no longer existed. And now I was being asked if he came from a place even the hospital didn't have on file. I stayed with the orderlies as they wheeled Blake inside. The nurse who'd questioned me was gone now, replaced by someone else, a man with a clipboard who didn't even look up as we passed him. Blake was taken to observation room 2, which wasn't the one we'd been told earlier. The room was clean, white, bare, the kind that doesn't look lived in or used, just maintained for protocol. They hooked him up to vitals quietly like they'd done it before, like they'd done it to him before. Blake looked straight at the ceiling and said nothing. I stood outside the glass trying to process what was happening. I pulled out my phone, opened the transfer request I'd been sent from dispatch. It was gone. Not deleted, not missing. Entire chain was gone. There was no record of any call, no text, no file, no number. The only thing left was a timestamp in my call log with no name and no duration. I walked to the intake desk and asked to speak with someone in administration. They pointed me to the third-floor records department. When I got there, the woman behind the desk asked for the patient's name and file ID. I gave her both. She typed slowly. Her screen glowed cold green for too long. She frowned and said, "There's nothing here, not today, not ever under that name." I asked her to try again. She said she did. I asked to see someone from medical intake, security, anyone who could confirm I had arrived with a patient at 3:47 a.m. She looked at me blankly and said, "Sir, if you arrived with a patient, someone would have logged you in, but you're not in the system either." I laughed, then stupid, nervous laugh, the kind that escapes when you know something's wrong, but you still think maybe you can fix it. I pulled out my ID. My credentials showed her my name, the badge. She took it, scanned it, then handed it back. This badge was deactivated 3 weeks ago. That's when my stomach turned. That's when I knew this wasn't just a missed call or an error or a tired mind. My identity had started to dissolve around me piece by piece. I went back downstairs to the rig. The back doors still open. The stretcher gone. Not just Blake everything. The belts, the straps, the oxygen monitor, like nothing had ever been there. Just me standing in the back of an empty ambulance with cold air and a buzzing fluorescent light above me. I turned on the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Unit 6, do you copy?" Static, I tried again. "Dispatch, this is Night 6. I've just completed a patient drop-off, but intake has no record and the paperwork is missing. Please advise." More static. Then a voice, quiet, muffled. A male voice. "Night 6, we don't show any active runs for your unit status. Not logged? Please confirm your location." I answered. "County General ER Loading Bay East Entrance." Silence. Then, "That facility is not on rotation. Tonight, stand by for supervisor." But no one called back. I left the rig and walked to the edge of the loading bay, pacing. Like that would somehow make the hospital feel more real. I looked up at the building, counting the windows. Observation rooms, office floors, the same layout I'd seen dozens of times before. Except now, Every detail felt unfamiliar. The lighting colder, the signage wrong. Almost like a set built from memory, not design. I pulled out my personal phone, tried calling dispatch again. This time, no signal. I walked further into the lot away from the structure, finally got one bar, and dialed my supervisor's number straight to voicemail. I called my partner Ray, no answer. I sent a message, just 4 words. Were we on tonight? A minute passed, then 2, then 5, finally. A reply. You're not scheduled, I replied. I'm on call always this week, he sent back. No, man, you're not on the board. Haven't been since the Miller case. I froze. I knew that name. Miller was a fatal OD in a halfway house 2 weeks ago. I was there. I signed the damn report. I was the one who pronounced the time of death. I opened the report system from my phone, tried logging in, access denied credentials, invalid. I looked up again at the hospital and felt that deep, quiet type of fear. The kind that doesn't come from the unknown, but from the feeling that something has already been decided and you were left out of the conversation. I walked back inside through the main lobby this time, hoping maybe I'd find someone from the earlier shift, someone who could vouch for me. The security guard at the front desk didn't recognize me, said he'd never seen me, said there was no patient by that name, and no record of a medic team arriving during his shift. I asked him how long he'd been there. He said, since 10 p.m., which was impossible because I checked in before 4. I asked to see camera footage. He said, that requires a formal request from internal. I said, then call them. He picked up the phone, dialed an extension, waited, then frowned, hung up and said, that line's inactive. I asked what extension he dialed. He showed me the screen. It read 714. I nodded, said thank you, and walked away. But that number stuck in my head. I remembered it from the old directory. It wasn't internal security. It was facilities decommissioned in 2018. I walked the corridors again, heading back to observation 2. But when I got there, the room was empty. No bed, no vitals, no straps on the floor, just white tile and a faint indentation where a stretcher might have been the light overhead, flickering just slightly. I opened the supply closet nearby, hoping for something evidence. Gloves, trash, anything but the bins were all clean. Too clean, like the room had never been used. I went back to the front desk, asked again for Blake's. Record one more time. The nurse there pulled up the system and showed me the search. No such patient, no such transfer, no such EMT, she said it. Like she'd said it 100 times. I said, you saw me roll him in 20 minutes ago. She just blinked slowly and said, sir, if you're confused or in distress, I can call someone to evaluate you. Her tone wasn't condescending. It was controlled protocol, activated as if my presence here was already classified under tang, disturbance. I took the stairs down to the parking level, walked past the ER loading zone, and stopped in front of the ambulance again. Only this time, it wasn't mine. Same unit number, same scratches, same dent near the rear handle. But the dashboard was dark, the rig was locked, and when I looked inside it was spotless. No records, no blood pressure cuff, no signs of use, And I noticed one more thing. My jacket was missing, the one I always leave draped over the driver's seat like a habit I never think about. That was the moment I realized I was being erased. I didn't know where else to go, so I followed my gut, which meant following the places no one else wanted to be. I took the freight elevator near the kitchen service hallway and keyed in the old override code we used during training years ago. It still worked. The elevator groaned and creaked down to sublevel. One then stopped doors opening into a dim corridor where the air smelled of bleach and insulation. It wasn't completely abandoned. Lights still worked. Barely old signage on. The walls labeled storage and archive. And one door with no label, just a key card slot and a worn brass handle. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Rows of metal filing cabinets lined the room. No computers, no monitors, just cabinets and a single desk with an old ledger sitting in the center. I flipped it open, page after page of patient names. Dates, notes, most stamped, discharged, or transferred. But one entry near the bottom caught my eye. Blake Ronald ID 17,446. Date of intake redacted status pending comment. Do not process via standard intake. And beneath that, a handwritten note in red ink, returned once already hold for directive. I took a photo with my phone, just in case. Then heard something down the hall, footsteps. Slow, steady, deliberate. I killed the light on my phone and held my breath. Someone passed the open doorway, not a security guard. No badge, just gray scrubs. No name tag. They didn't stop, just walked past, silent as fog. I waited another minute, then stepped out and moved the opposite direction past the old laundry chute toward the boiler access. At the far end, tucked behind an old supply cage, found another room. This one, locked by padlock bolt cutters, hung nearby like someone expected them to be used. I clipped it, opened the door, and found what I didn't know I was looking for. Inside were shelves lined with sealed boxes, all the same label, property of S-Unit Storage, do not catalog. I opened the nearest one expecting files or meds, but instead found personal belongings. ID cards, uniforms, wallets, watches, all with hospital credentials, most expired, some still active. I flipped through them until my hand froze. One of the ID cards had my name to my photo, but not the same title. Underneath it read, Observer. Level 2. I had never seen that before, and the photo looked off, older. Somehow eyes slightly different, like a version of me I couldn't quite place. I heard the footsteps again, closer this time and muffled, talking too quiet to make out. I stuffed the ID into my pocket and slipped out a back door into a stairwell, heading up 2 levels, then out through a side exit into the lot. Night had fallen. The air was sharp, colder than it should have been. I reached the rig again, and this time it was open lights on monitor, beeping like it had been used recently. But the stretcher was still gone, and on the driver's seat was a folded note, written in perfect block letters. Your report has been filed. Observer status confirmed. Proceed as instructed. I didn't know what that meant, and I wasn't sure if I had ever been an EMT at all, or just someone they used to move a piece from one floor to another without asking too many questions. I didn't want to believe it, But the deeper I went, the more it made sense. I wasn't just moving a patient. I was delivering something or someone. And now that the delivery was made, they didn't need the delivery man to remember. I started walking back toward the main lot, cutting through corridors, trying to find the shortest way out. But every door I opened either led me back inside or deeper underground. I made it to the lobby once, but when I pushed open the glass doors, they opened into a hallway I recognized from sublevel 1. The same flickering light, same cart abandoned against the wall. I retraced my steps, this time turning right through radiology and straight into the east stairwell, but 3 flights up, dumped me in the emergency intake where I had started with Blake. But now the room was empty. Cold light buzzing and a note on the bed in the same precise print I'd seen before. "You've arrived again. Please stay this time." I ran out of the room, heart pounding, thinking I'd go back to the ambulance, start the engine, and drive without looking back. But the vehicle wasn't where I left it. The bay was empty. My footprints still fresh in the wet concrete, but no rig. No sign of entry. And the security footage monitor inside the booth was just static, like someone had pulled the signal or looped the feed. I turned to the guard station and banged on the glass. No one there, lights off screen, still flickering. Reached under the desk, pulled the drawer open, and found only a single photograph inside it. Was me sitting in the driver's seat of the rig, but the background wasn't the hospital lot. It was a different location, somewhere rural, trees low, sunlight in my eyes, and I was smiling like the photo had been taken during a moment I didn't remember living. The back of the photo had a label, Daniel 1A completed. I shoved it in my pocket and started toward the west exit, took the ramp down and burst through the fire door into open air. At least I thought it was. But when I reached the sidewalk, I looked up and realized I was back inside, standing just outside the elevator on the 3rd floor, outside the records department, where the woman at the desk looked up at me and said, "You again," like she expected me. I didn't answer. I walked past her into the hallway, found the nearest office, locked myself inside, and sat on the floor with the photo in my hand and the file I'd stolen from Sublevel stuffed under my jacket. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the office monitor and whispered, "What am I missing?" And to my horror, the screen lit up on its own words, appearing in white letters, one at a time. "You are not the first. You are not the original. You are the one that returns." That broke me for a moment, not because it was impossible, but because it explained everything. The loops, the repeated faces, the locked files, the mirrored ID card with the different title. If I wasn't the first, then who was and where did they go? If I was the return, then what happened to the first delivery? I sat there in the dark office, listening to the air vents hum and the lights buzz, and the sound of my breath slowly changing rhythm like someone else was syncing with me. And I finally understood. I was never here to save a patient. I was here to replace one. I waited until the building settled into night silence before I made my move. Most of the hospital dims the lights. After 2 a.m. shifts change, patients sleep or disappear into whatever quiet place they're assigned. I took the stairwell down to the sublevel again. thinking maybe I could find the old maintenance phone in the breaker room and call out to dispatch directly bypass everything. I reached the panel door behind pathology, wedged it open, and found the black rotary phone mounted on the wall. Still intact, still dusty. I picked it up and dialed the number I remembered from our station. 8 rings, then a click. No voice, just breathing heavy, slow, then a whisper. My whisper. "We hear you, Daniel. Please, wait." I slammed the phone down, stepped back, but it rang again. Same dusty phone, same wall. I let it ring 5 times, then answered it, shaking. "This is Daniel Knight, Medic Unit. 6, do you copy?" Silence. Then my voice again. "You're almost ready to leave. Please confirm intention," I said. "Intention for what?" No reply. I hung up again. I stumbled back into the hallway and tried calling my own cell from the admin phone in the records office just to see if the number existed. It rang once, then the line opened, and again I heard myself, "If you're hearing this, you've reached Observation Unit 3. Please remain still until the transition completes." I asked, "What transition? What is happening to me?" But the voice ignored me, kept reading from a script. "Vital stable memory alignment at 93%, observer set. Replacing original." Then the line cut. I was done trying to be subtle. I kicked open the archive door and dumped 3 drawers of records onto the floor. Patient logs, staff rosters, and experimental intake sheets. Names crossed out, replaced, moved around. One file stood out. Red level. Access. Handwritten and untagged. I opened it, and inside found a log titled Repetition Incidents Unit 3. Pages and pages of reports, all referencing the same patient name, Ronald Blake, each one dated years apart, each with different EMTs, different observers, but always the same language. Subject arrived, unscheduled, staff unaware records, missing, patient placed in isolation, status unresolved. I turned the page and saw my name on the last entry, not in the narrative, in the heading. Next observer assignment, Daniel M. Template initiated, expected return 3:11 a.m. It was a schedule, not a report. I hadn't walked into a hospital that night. I'd been walked back in, returned, replaced, brought to the point of origin like a piece of mail, never claimed long enough to go stale. My hands were shaking. I tried calling Ray again, this time from the burner I keep in my bag. A line I never registered under my name. It rang and rang, then picked up. Someone breathed for a moment, then said, "You're in the wrong version, Daniel. Please go back to the beginning," I shouted. "Where is the beginning?" But they hung up. I walked into the nearest supply closet, pulled down the old floor plan binder, and flipped through the pages. Most were marked with new wing names and code dates, but one map near the back showed a door labeled Unit 0. No stairs, no elevator. Just a hallway. Beneath the foundation, marked Access Restricted, 2 levels below sublevel. One a hallway that was never meant to be found. And I knew where I had to go. I found the hallway behind the locked records room, hidden behind a false panel marked Equipment Storage. It took force to pry open, but behind it was a narrow staircase with dust so thick it muffled my steps. The walls were unfinished. No, paint just raw concrete and wiring stapled in patterns. I couldn't recognize like diagrams without labels. I counted steps, one flight, then two, then three, until I reached a steel door with no handle, only a small intercom mounted beside. I pressed the button and waited nothing. Then a crackle, followed by my voice. State intention, Daniel. I didn't speak. I just breathed. Then the lock clicked, and the door opened slowly behind. It was a hallway, lit by old bulbs, flickering in rhythm. A pulse, not electric, but deliberate. And at the far end, a room lined with monitors. No people, no chairs, just screens. Each one showing rooms I'd never seen, and others I recognized from earlier that night. One screen showed the ER lobby with me standing in it live, but I wasn't in the lobby now. I was watching it happen, and I could see myself blinking, confused, speaking to no one, a loop playing in real time next to it. Another feed me, sitting in the rig, writing in my logbook, time-stamped 3:11 a.m. Another version paused, staring ahead, blank, unblinking. It wasn't playback, it was active observation, and every version of me was slightly different. Different tone, posture, timing, all synced but separate. Then I noticed the name above. Each screen, Daniel. M1 Daniel. M2 Daniel. M3, all the way down to Daniel. M7. I looked down at my hands, wondered which one I was. There was a console below the monitors with a single prompt, confirm alignment with current instance. I hovered my hand above it, afraid of what would happen if I said yes, more afraid of what if I didn't. So I pressed confirm, and the screen went black. Then, lit up with white text, welcome observer Daniel. M4 confirmation. Complete memory sync at 96%, overwrite pending. I stepped back, heart pounding, and saw a mirror on the far wall, full length. Clean, too clean. I walked up and looked at myself, except it wasn't me. Not entirely. The jawline was sharper, the eyes clearer, the face more rested, and the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't copying me. I was converging toward it, not the other way, around. Then a tone played loud, low, steady, and a new screen lit up on the side wall, showing a man strapped to a hospital bed staring upward, blankly, sensors taped to his skull mouth slightly open, breathing shallow, and next to him was a chart marked Patient ID R. Blake. Status. Suspended comment. Instance contains original observer sequence. Hold until template completes. And I understood. Blake was the first, the baseline, the thread they'd been testing over and over until it became me. I wasn't the one transporting him. I was replacing him. And now, the loop was closing. Behind me, the intercom buzzed again, and my voice whispered, "You may now proceed to integration," and the door beside the mirror unlocked. I pushed open the door beside the mirror and stepped into the chamber. It was smaller than I expected, round, dim, and almost silent, save for the faint sound of my own breath. Echoing against the walls at the center was a chair metal bolted to the floor beside it, a terminal with no screen, just a speaker embedded in the surface and a microphone that blinked slowly, waiting like it already knew I was here. There were no restraints, no gloves, no machines, just the chair and the voice, which spoke before I could ask anything. Integration is voluntary, Daniel, but deviation has reached terminal drift to restore continuity. Original protocol must resume. I asked what that meant. The voice replied, "You have exceeded tolerance. Memory cohesion at 91% responses. Inconsistent identity, unstable." I sat down slowly, the metal cold against my spine, my hands trembling slightly. I looked around for cameras, but realized there didn't need to be any. The observation was internal. Now embedded in the space itself, the speaker clicked, and my voice returned, not recorded, not artificial, just spoken from the wall. "You brought Blake back, but you were already here. The moment you touched the file, you were initialized. The others were alignments, fragments. You are the loop." I whispered, "What happens if I refuse?" The voice paused, then replied, "Then you'll continue, but no one will recognize you. Your credentials will degrade. Your face will shift. You will exist without reference, a loop without anchor." I asked, "What happens?" "If I accept," the voice answered, "you'll remember all of it and none of it. You'll become the baseline. The one others aligned to the story won't be yours, but you'll tell it like it was." The screen lit for a moment and showed the same hallway I had entered from, now empty. The monitors behind me. Now reflected rooms where other versions of me stood watching, deciding, doubting, looping like I had. I realized then that every time I brought someone in, every time I believed I was the medic, I was only completing the cycle because it had to happen. Someone had to deliver Blake. Someone had to observe. Someone had to return. I stood up, walked to the console, and placed my hand on the scanner. It lit up green, then red, then steady blue. The speaker said, "Observer Daniel. M4 integrated Observer Daniel. 5 preparing deployment," and behind me, another door hissed open, revealing a hallway with white walls, new, clean, like it had never been walked before. And waiting at the end was a stretcher and a patient covered with a white sheet, unmoving, not strapped, not fighting, just silent, waiting. I stepped forward, knowing I'd done this before, not once, but many times, in many forms, and that this time would be no different, because I wasn't here to fix anything. I was just here to deliver the next version